There was a time when there was nothing to name. The sun and moon didn't exist. There were no oceans or mountains, no birds, no voices, no roads leading anywhere. There were no gods living in palaces of clouds, no heroes preparing for battle, no temples where offerings were burned at dawn. What existed before all of that is something very hard to imagine, because it was precisely the absence of shape, of boundaries, of direction. The ancient Greeks called it chaos. They didn't think of it as violent disorder or a storm out of control. They understood it as a first state, vast and silent, where everything that would come after lay sleeping, not yet knowing it was going to be born. A space that was neither darkness nor light, but simply the possibility that something might one day exist. From chaos came Gaia, the earth. It wasn't a sudden appearance or an explosion. It was more like when a seed slowly opens and begins to spread from the inside out, without hurry, without warning. Gaia was the foundation of everything, the firm ground, the deep rock, the valleys waiting to fill with water, the fields waiting to be made fertile. She was, in the oldest sense of the word, the mother, not just of the beings that would come after, but of the world itself. Before any god existed with a name and a story, Gaia was already there, holding everything together without anyone asking her to. From Gaia also came Uranus, the sky, who stretched over the earth like an enormous dome, a wall-less ceiling made of air and stars. He was the counterpart to the earth. If Gaia was what you could walk on, touch, and plant, Uranus was what you looked up toward, what covered everything, what seemed to have no end. The sky and the earth joined together, and from that union everything else began to grow. It was the first bond in the Greek world, the first pair, the first proof that from two different things, something completely new can be born. From Gaia and Uranus came many children. Among them were the Titans, a generation of enormous and powerful beings who inhabited the world long before the gods we know today. They came before Olympus, older than Zeus, older than Athena, Apollo, or Aphrodite. There were 12 in all, 6 male and 6 female, and their names carried a weight that made you feel the gravity of what they represented. Oceanus would become the great river that encircled the known world. Hyperion was the one who walked high across the skies. Mnemosyne held the memory of everything that had ever happened. Themis embodied order and justice. Rhea, the one who flows. And among them, the youngest of the brothers, the one whose choices would shape the course of everything that followed. His name was Cronus. Cronus was not the tallest or the most feared among his siblings, but he was the most determined. And in Greek myths, that difference almost always matters more than size or raw strength. Uranus ruled the way rulers do when they believe power belongs to them by birthright, and that birthright has no expiration date. He feared his own children. He worried that one of them might grow strong enough to challenge him, that one of those titans might take what he considered entirely his. So, when his children with Gaia were born, Uranus confined them deep within the earth, giving them no freedom to move, no chance to grow in the open world. It was a form of control dressed up as order, and Gaia endured it for a long time, until her patience ran out and her grief turned into something more purposeful, into resolve. It was Gaia who went to her Titan children and asked if any of them was willing to stand against their father. Only Cronus said yes. He accepted what none of the others dared to do, and with that decision, he set himself on the path to power. After Cronus acted, Uranus was separated from the earth, banished forever from Gaia. And before retreating to the edges of the world, the sky spoke words that hung in the air like a warning no one could ignore, that what Cronus had done would one day be done to him, that one of his own children would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his father. Cronus heard those words and never forgot them. From that point on, Cronus ruled the world. The age of the Titans had begun, and for a long time, order was his. The seas and skies answered to his authority. The world ran under his reign with a steadiness that could have been mistaken for peace. But the prophecy his defeated father had spoken never fully disappeared. Cronus carried it the way you carry an invisible weight, always present, heaviest in the quiet moments. And when he took Rhea as his wife, one of his fellow Titans, and when their children began arriving one by one, that invisible weight found a way to express itself, a way Cronus made no effort to hide. The firstborn was swallowed. Cronus consumed the newborn because he could not afford to ignore Uranus's warning. If one of his children was destined to overthrow him, the answer seemed simple. That child should not exist, should disappear before having the chance to grow, to walk, to learn its own name. Then the second child was born and met the same fate. Then the third, the fourth, the fifth. Hestia, the first, vanished the moment Cronus received her. Demeter, who would one day bring abundance to the earth and make the fields of the world bloom, was swallowed too. Hera, destined to be queen among the gods, never had the chance to cry her first cry. Hades, who would govern the kingdom of the dead, and Poseidon, lord of the seas and earthquakes, shared the same fate. 5 children born, 5 children lost. Rhea brought each of them into the world with all the strength and love a mother can hold, and each time she had to watch them disappear, powerless, her grief counting for nothing against her husband's fear. But grief, when it goes on long enough, changes what it's made of. In some people, it becomes quiet resignation. In Rhea, it became cunning. When the time came to give birth to her 6th child, Rhea made a decision. She would not hand this one over. She was not going to let Cronus's fear consume this child the way it had consumed the others. She sought the counsel of Gaia, her mother, the earth, who understood the deepest mysteries of the world and carried a wisdom that had been building since before time existed. Together, they put together a plan that was simple, almost quiet, and depended on a single thing: that Cronus would not look closely enough. Rhea traveled to the island of Crete, far from her husband's gaze, and there, in a cave on Mount Ida surrounded by trees and stone, she gave birth to her 6th child. The baby was carefully wrapped and left in the care of guardians who would watch over him in secret. Then Rhea took a stone the size of a newborn, covered it in cloth as though it were a child, and returned to Cronus. He held out his arms without much hesitation, without examining what he was receiving, without suspecting a thing. He swallowed the stone, and he was satisfied, convinced that the cycle had repeated once more, that the prophecy was still something he could control. He had no idea he'd been deceived. He had no idea that in Crete, in a cave tucked among mountains, a real child was breathing, sleeping, and beginning to grow. They named the child Zeus. Zeus was raised in secret, far from anything Cronus governed. Tradition tells us he was fed by a goat named Amalthea, whose milk was so nourishing that the young god grew with a strength that seemed beyond natural, even for a divine being. His guardians, the Curetes, clashed their shields and made noise with their weapons every time the child cried, so that the sound would cover his cries, and only the wind and the echo of rocks would reach Cronus's ears. No one in Cronus's service knew the child existed. No one went looking for what they couldn't imagine was lost. And so Zeus's early years passed quietly, protected, hidden, raised in distance and silence. There's something strange about this story, and at the same time something deeply familiar. The greatest gods in Greek mythology, the ones who would one day rule the world from the peaks of Olympus, and whose stories would fill thousands of years of legend, did not begin their lives in glory or in power. They began trapped or hidden, or waiting for a moment that hadn't come yet. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon were held inside their own father's body, with no way of knowing when that darkness would end. And Zeus, the one destined to change all of their fates, was for now just a child sleeping in a cave while the world went on not knowing he existed. This is how it all began, not with a proclamation or a thunderbolt, but with a mother who chose to resist, a grandmother who knew how to help her, and a stone that fooled the king of the universe. The great stories that would come after, full of battles and transformations, love and punishment, are rooted in something much more intimate. A father's fear, a mother's decision, a child who didn't yet know what he would become, but who was already alive, and that was enough to change everything. Zeus kept growing in Crete, and time moved forward, the way it always does, without asking anyone's permission.